I had this fascination for animal behavior from the time when 18 months. I was looking at earthworms and then watching hens lay eggs and things like this. And by the time I was 10, I was madly in love with Tarzan, terribly jealous of Tarzan's Jane. Thought I would have made a much better mate for Tarzan myself, which I would have. And so at that time I was already determined to go and live with animals in Africa and write books about them. And you know, Africa was the dark continent, the end of the Second World War. We didn't know anything about Africa. We didn't have any money, but I had a wonderful mother. And she used to say, Jane, if you really want something and you work hard enough and you take advantage of opportunity and you never give up, you'll find a way. And so I always was saving money. So I left that job and I worked as a waitress. And I saved up all my wages, all my tips, and I used to hide them under the carpet. And eventually there was enough for a return fare on a boat, because in those days boats were cheaper. And off I went. I was 23.
In 1960, famed anthropologist Louis Leakey was looking for someone to study the chimpanzee in the wild, someone with the passion and the patience to enter their world, and perhaps learn something about ourselves as well.
And it was complete magic. Animals, and every evening I was allowed to go out on the plains, just Gillian and I, zebra, giraffe, all of them, a rhino, one day 2 young lions. Can you imagine if you are a young girl dreaming of Africa and you wake up every morning and you're in your dream? That was when he began talking about the chimpanzees.
From her very first observations, she saw them not only as a group, but as individuals, revealing insights that the scientific world did not want to hear.
The emotional response, the feeling, joy and sorrow and fear, those were the things that I absolutely was not meant to talk about when I first went to Cambridge to do my PhD in 1961. The brain and central nervous system, the anatomy is more like ours than that of any living creature. You know, the geneticists tell us we differ by only just over 1%. And so not surprisingly, really, we have all these similarities in social behavior and intellectual performance and emotional response.
But in the years to come, Dr. Goodall would learn that it was not enough to simply observe the chimps in their natural world, but to find ways to protect that world as well.
When I got to Gombe in 1960, you could take a little boat and you could go for miles up and down this lake on both sides, and the water was crystal clear. And if you go back there today, that's 38 years later, well, the chimps have gone, haven't they? Of course, they couldn't live here. And the baboons and the monkeys and all the other forest animals, they've gone. But what about the people living here? What's happened to them? Obviously, what I'm doing here at Gombe and seeing the destruction and learning how chimps are dying and being tortured in laboratories and things like that, that made me very concerned about the environment and about cruelty. And then, you know, the more you think about these issues, the more you realize they're interrelated all around the world. We have 2 main programs that are sort of rural development programs. And we have a big reforestation program funded by the European Union, which also stresses conservation education for children and adults, and is trying to improve the lives of women in the expectation that as they take more control over their lives, the birth rate will drop, because it's the increase in numbers of people that's led to this terrible devastation that is threatening the people with starvation. So that all these things linked up to how can I stop in Tanzania? I can't. And then as I travel around, everywhere I go, I try and talk with schools. And we've actually started a program for young people, which began in Tanzania. Roots and Shoots, and the name roots creep under the ground and make a firm foundation, and shoots seem small, but to reach the light, they can break open a brick wall. Okay, so now we think of the brick wall as all the problems that humans have put on this planet, And the problems are many. There's pollution and the cutting down of trees and the spread of the desert, the soil erosion, there's overpopulation all over the world, the hole in the ozone layer, and the changing global climate. On top of that, you have all these nasty human characteristics of greed, cruelty, crime, drugs, and finally war. We've got to stop pointing fingers and saying, well, it's the fault of science, it's the fault of industry, it's the fault of politicians. We've got to realize we must take responsibility. And that's where young people come in. So that I think my greatest area for hope is the excitement that young people I've seen all around the world, once they know there are problems and once they're empowered to do something about those problems. We've got over 1,000 groups of Roots and Shoots in North America alone, and it's in 50 different countries around the world.
The Roots and Shoots program was taken to a new level as an international organization in the summer of 1998. Students from Japan, Germany, and the United States were teamed up with 3 Tanzanian students in a program called Discover the World.
I think that what's really exciting about this Discover the World project is taking Roots and Shoots members from different parts of the world to Tanzania, which is where the Roots and Shoots program began in 1991. Being able to match up kids from outside with Roots and Shoots members within Tanzania so that they can all learn about each other. And they'll get together, they'll discuss problems from their different countries, and then they'll travel around and see a little bit of Tanzania's problems.